Today we will start our main discussion of the course, and first, as I said last week, our first topic is on market and government. So the policies that we are going to talk about throughout the semester are the government interventions, the government policies. Okay? So today we will talk about the role of the government in more general term, okay, not specifically about the social policies or social insurance programs, but including those, but in a little more general term, we will talk about the government, roles of the government. Okay, so let's see. So I will just give you like four main questions that we're gonna deal with this time. Okay, this is somewhat different from your lecture note. I just changed a little bit this morning, so there will be a slight difference. This is it's a complementary slide to tell you that what we are going to do today. Okay, so here we're going to ask four main questions. First, what are the roles of the government in a market economy? If you think about it, you know, when you study economics for the first time, what do you learn? Let's say the principles of economics. Usually, what is the first topic? What is the first topic? Do you learn about government? What do you learn about first? Probably you will start with, in general, the consumers or producers, right? So usually the first thing that the economists think of is actually a market. Okay, market has the consumers and the producers. Okay, then somehow they meet at the market. Actually, they don't meet physically sometimes, but in general nowadays they don't meet physically. So they come together and then they do transactions, okay, and then they produce a certain outcome. Okay? That's what the economists think as the economy. Okay? And if you think about it, actually there is not much of a government in the market. Okay? You don't need a government for the market to function in a theoretical sense. Okay? But in reality, we have government everywhere, right? So first thing we're going to ask is that, what are they doing? Okay, so if we think our economy as a market economy, okay, theoretically speaking, in most cases, probably we don't need a government. Okay? But still, we do have governments, and they are doing lots of things. So here we will ask, what are the roles of the government in a market economy? Okay? Actually, I think most of the things that you have actually learned in, for example, in microeconomics, like market failure issues. Okay? So we will talk about that and then some others. And second, that if we accept there are government interventions, then actually one good question we have to ask is that, how good are the government interventions? How do we evaluate them? Okay? So this one we will briefly talk about it. Okay? And then last two questions are about the government itself. Okay? If you think about government, actually when you learn about the government in most of the economic courses, we don't talk about the government itself much. Okay? We think of a government as some type of entity that does their thing. Okay? But actually, if you think about the government, in a democratic society, government is not the king or some kind of dictator that does their own thing, right? They should follow a certain, actually it is supposed to, they have to follow the people's preferences. Basically means what people want. Okay? Actually it's a little deeper question that can a government actually know what we want? Okay? It seems like a silly question, but it's actually a pretty important question you have to think about. Do they actually know what we want? Okay. Is it even possible for them to know what we want? Okay. So we will talk about that. We will talk about a little bit about the democratic process, a little about like something like a politics, but not much. So we will ask the question. Okay, so how the government, so we talk about what are the roles of the government. We think of the government as some type of entity. Okay, then we talk about how the government actually know. Okay, and then last thing is that what happens often with the government interventions is that they actually produce bad results. Okay, they don't actually work well. A lot of cases. Sometimes they do work well as planned, as desired, but in lots of cases, the government programs don't actually work. Right? So we will talk about why do government interventions often fail to produce the good outcomes. Okay? Even if they try, sometimes they don't even try, but even if they try, sometimes they don't produce good results. So we will talk about the government interventions in general for the first half, and then for the second half, we'll talk about how the government do actually make decisions, okay? And is it even possible for them to make good decisions? And then we talk about why the government do not work as well as we hope. Okay? So we talk about, for example, like problems with the government. Okay? So that's the thing that we will talk about. Okay. So first, let's think of the government interventions in the market economy. So what are the roles of the government in a market economy? Okay, if we think of a market, okay, the market economy, you start with households and firms, or you can say these are consumers and these are producers. Okay. So if you go back to your, let's say, first few lectures that you have learned in, let's say, microeconomics or in principles of economics, you usually start with either households or firms, consumers or producers. And we talk about how the households make decisions and firms make decisions, right? So what happens in the market is that basically what households and firms do is that they engage in an exchange through market. Okay, that's the market economy. That's the main part of the market exchange. They sell and buy things. Okay? So firms sell products to the households, products and services, goods and services to the households, and households buy them and use it or consume it. And households actually provide labor and capital to the firms, and the firms use labor and capital to produce. And so that's how they, produce and consume things. So they can do, things themselves pretty well. Okay. And however, that in the real economy we have government. Okay? So government can affect households or firms in various ways. So we just call them these influences. There are three ways of doing it. We will talk about it later. But we just call them in all, let's say, government interventions. Okay? So any action the government affects how the households and firms engage in market exchange, we call them government interventions. Or we can think of it as like government programs or government regulations. All those things, we just call them government interventions. Okay? That's the term we're going to use. So government interventions can be certain programs or can be just a regulation, like rules, setting the rule. You have to follow this rule. Okay? Or it can be other things. We'll talk about it later. Okay? Get it? So if we think of market exchange economy, I've just briefly just to talk about the basics of the market. So I'm pretty sure that if you have learned microeconomics, then you should be familiar with most of the things that we're going to talk about. Households are characterized by preferences. Okay, so they like something, they don't like something. So they have preferences over bundles of goods and services, and generally we represent these preferences using a utility function. We have this we use this thing called the utility function that we represent preference. Okay? So if you think of just the general setup of economy, and these households have something, they have endowments of goods, abilities, and human capital. Right? And they also shares of ownership of farms in the economy. Okay? Who owns the farm? At the end, if you follow the owners, they are the households. They are the people who own the farms. Okay? Even if when you talk about farm, we talk as if farms is some type of independent actor, but actually at the end, the ownership belongs to households. So if you think of general economy, households have preference, endowments, and ownership of farms. Okay? And then they get income from selling their endowments. Okay? So endowment here is, for example, like most of the people get income from working. Okay? They sell, or they actually, selling is a little strong word. For example, we can say that workers get income using by renting out their human capital. Okay? So that's something they have. Or if they have ownership of the farm, they will get dividends from their shares of the ownership. Okay? So that's the source of income, and then they spend that income into consumption. Okay? And then they get the utility. They get utility from the consumption activity. Okay? So ultimately, what households does is that they get income by selling their endowments, and then using that income, they engage in exchange with the producers and using their goods and services and get the utility. Okay? So that's what the households do, okay, in very abstract terms. And farms are characterized by technologies. The farms are the producers. So they use the technology to produce. Okay? And their inputs are ultimately from the households. Okay? Capital and labor are from the households. And then what they do is that they maximize the profit. So what we actually want is the general equilibrium. So the households and farms engage in a market exchange, okay? And then this market will reach a certain state, okay? Then we call it a general equilibrium. This is actually not only one market, there are different markets. So markets reach a certain state, okay? And then in economics, that state is called the general equilibrium. Okay, general equilibrium is just a set of prices. Okay, so how much is this thing? Okay, how much this good is, how much this service is, how much this labor is, how much this capital is, the set of prices and supply of and demand for goods, services, labor, and capital. Okay, so the market basically determines the price and the quantity. Okay. And then these prices and quantity is not just any price or not just any quantity. Okay? When we call it the general equilibrium, these quantities under this price and quantities, households maximize utility, so households get what they want. And farms maximize profits, so farms get what they want. Okay? And then demand equals supply. So there is no excess demand, there is no excess supply. So each market will reach this state. Okay? And what we learned in, let's say, microeconomics is to learn how the markets reach that outcome. Okay? That's the end of the microeconomic theory. So the economy will reach a certain equilibrium, then we call it the general equilibrium, if that satisfies these three conditions. If the market is not at the state where these three conditions are satisfied, the market will move. The price will change, or the supply will change, or the demand will change, until they reach this general equilibrium. Okay? So that's how we see the economy. Okay? So the farms and households engage in market exchange, and this market exchange will eventually lead to an outcome called a general equilibrium, and then this general equilibrium satisfies these conditions. That's how the market economy works. Okay, now one thing that we know about the general equilibrium is it's efficient. Okay. So we use efficiency a lot later. So what the theory says, okay, actually it's proven mathematically. Under certain conditions, the allocation of goods, services, labor, and capital achieved at the general equilibrium is Pareto efficient. Okay? So we call it the efficiency of general equilibrium. What is a Pareto efficient allocation? Pareto efficient allocation, as probably most of you already know, is an allocation from which market participants cannot deviate from without lowering at least one market participant's welfare. Okay? So it basically means that if we are at the Pareto efficient outcome, okay, it's very difficult to get out of. Okay? So if we want to get out of this, then at least one person says, no, that's not what I want. That's the Pareto efficient outcome. If everybody says, okay, let's do it, then it's not Pareto efficient. Okay? Pareto efficient outcome is there must be at least one person or one party or one firm or one consumer saying that, okay, I don't want it because my utility will be lower or my profit will be lower. So you cannot get out of it. No, you cannot just move away from this. Okay? So what the economic theory says that if we reach a general equilibrium, then this general equilibrium is an efficient outcome in the sense that, okay, it is Pareto efficient. It's an allocation that you cannot get out without lowering at least one market participant's welfare. That's the efficiency that we talk about. In another sense, actually this is a very technical way of looking at efficient allocation. Actually, one way of thinking about efficient allocation is that there is no waste. Okay? There is no waste of resources. Meaning, if there is a waste of resources, okay, think about it, then everybody will agree, okay, at least no one will object to use that unused resources. Think about it, right? Let's say you have, let's say you get together and then you do something that you just realize that, okay, we can use, let's say, 1 billion, let's say, okay, let's use dollar. Okay, so one becomes pretty large number. Let's say you have $1,000 just discovered, $1,000 that you can use. Okay, then you can say, okay, let's use this $1,000 and buy something for us. Then everybody will say, oh yeah, why not, right? Because everybody will want it to use that amount of money. If you don't use it, it's just wasted. Okay, you can use it for your own benefit, at least one person's benefit. Okay, you just realize, okay, I just discovered $1,000. I spend it for myself, but no one else will be harmed by by myself using the money, right? So at least I will be better off without making the other person's worse off. So that is actually more efficient way of using that resources. Okay. Probably not everybody likes, but at least it does not hurt, anybody else. So in that sense, Pareto efficient outcome is an outcome that does not waste any resources. Okay. That's the way of looking at Pareto efficient allocation. So Pareto efficient allocation, we just talk about unused resources, but there may be resources that is not used well. You just discover that you use these resources on, let's say, producing, let's say, good A, but you just realize that we can actually use this resource on producing B, and then it's actually even better than making at A. Then everyone will agree, yeah, let's use this thing to produce B rather than A, because then by that, actually we can have more things to consume ourselves. Okay? So in that sense, that is also that, the activity that makes economy more efficient. Okay? So Pareto efficient outcome, you can think of it as something that we don't use we don't waste any resources. Okay, that's how we look at it. Questions? Okay. So wasteful use of resources cannot be Pareto efficient. Okay, so that's what the economic theory says. Okay, I just reviewed the whole thing of microeconomics in 10 minutes. Okay. Okay. So this is actually a graphic representation of Pareto efficient allocation. Make things really simple. In this case, we think of person A and person B. Okay? Just two-person economy. There is no production. Let's say there are just two goods, X and Y, which is just over there. Okay? And then thinking about how we divide this X and Y between these two persons, A and B. That's the simplest exchange economy without any production, with the two goods, two individuals. So there is no firm, because there is no production. So in this case, how you look at this diagram, I think you have seen this diagram before. Edgeworth box, right? This is what it's called. This is from A's point of view. This is from B's point of view. So in A's point of view, if X increases, if the person A has more X or more Y, the person will be better off. Okay? So we can use the indifference curve to show the preference of person A. Okay? So these are something like UA1 and UA2 are these individuals. Person A's indifference curves. Okay? The indifference curve is just a graphical representation of preference. Okay? Preference is just means that how much this person likes X, how much this person likes Y. That's the preference. And for B, we just use this one as the origin. So for B, more X means moving this way. More Y means moving this way. And for B's preference, for B's indifference, we use UB1 and UB2. Okay? So for A, UA2 and UA1, which one is higher utility? A2 is obviously the higher utility because this person has more X and more Y. UB1, UB2, which one is higher utility for person B? That's what's to be UB2. Okay? So further away from the origin, the persons are better off. Okay? So obviously person B wants to be somewhere here, if they can choose anything. And person A wants to be somewhere here. Okay? You just think of market exchange. So here, let's think of point A as, let's say, the starting point. So at point A means that person A has XA. Person B has YA. Okay? That's what person A has by default. Okay? It's their endowment. Actually, we call it person A's endowment, XA and YA. And person B's endowment is obviously that XB, YB. Okay? So A is the starting point. Let's say someday they meet up and talk about how we, exchange things to make ourselves better off. Okay? And see that whether they can actually do better than point A. Okay? So if we look at this diagram, for example, like moving from A to B will make person A better off, worse off, indifferent? Moving from A to B, person A becomes better off, worse off? No, right? The person B is just indifferent, meaning that person A, indifferent. Person A just doesn't care. A or B, same. Okay? How about person B? Becomes better off or worse off? It's difficult to tell. There is no diagram. Okay. So think of, let's say, from A to C. Okay, let's see. Oh, well, I have this diagram here, right? Okay. Okay, so from A to B, okay, we can say that A is indifferent, right? B is likely to be somewhere here, so the person B must be indifferent or worse off or better off. Must be better off because point B is further away from point A than point A from the origin OB. Okay? So from moving from A to B makes person A indifferent, but person B better off. So meaning that if, let's say, person B says, let's move from A to B, then person A will say, I don't care. Person B will be, wow, that's a good thing, okay? Because he or she will be better off. So we can say that A is not Pareto efficient. Okay? You can move away from A without making anybody worse off. Okay? Moving from A to D is the same thing, right? Moving from A to D makes person A better off, person B indifferent. So person A will like it, person B says, yeah, that's okay. From moving from A to C is, when we move from A to C, then both parties will be better off, right? A will be better, UA2 and UA1, so higher utility. And moving A to C, it's from UB1 to UB2, so it's higher utility. So from moving from A to C is obviously another way of reaching the point where that both people will have better outcomes. Okay? So we can clearly see that, for example, that A is not Pareto efficient. Okay? B, C, D, all of them are Pareto efficient. So there are actually multiple Pareto efficient outcomes. Okay, so that's the basics of Pareto efficiency. Once you are point C, it's very difficult to move away from it because if we move from C to D, then who will object? B will object because the B's utility will fall. Moving from C to B is obviously not good for person A. Okay? So once you are here, you cannot get out of it without making anybody else worse off. Okay? So in that sense, so it's a waste of resources, meaning that in that sense, A is just wasting resources, wasting X or Y in terms of society's point of view. They can, for example, when you move from A to B, right? Then you just take away, let's say, we just take away X from A and then give it to B. Okay? And then we just take away a little bit of Y from B and then give it to A. Okay? So we can change the allocation of X and Y between these two people, and then the society, will be better off. At least one person will be better off without making another person worse off. So in that way, it's a better use of resources. Or in another way of saying it, that A is actually at point A, we are wasting resources. We can actually reallocate the resources, okay, in a way to everybody, or at least one person better off without making another person worse off. So far what we have seen is that if we have pure market economy without the government intervention, okay, then actually we just leave A and B, whatever they do, whatever they want to do, okay, we just leave them alone. Then they will figure out that, okay, we can be better off by moving away from A, and then they will reach a certain point on, for example, between B and D, along this curve. Okay? That's what we expect from market exchange economy. So far, what we mean is that we don't need a government. We don't need anybody to tell us what to do. We don't need anybody to give us a rule of what to do. Now, that's not exactly true, but we'll talk about it later. Okay. A few seconds later, we need a rule, but anyway. Okay. So far that we have seen that no role of the government, but we have government. So let's talk about the government. Okay. So to think of the government, first we just agreed that market exchange economy will lead to an efficient outcome. When we say efficient, we usually means Pareto efficient. Okay. So we just said that the Pareto efficient outcome will be reached. Okay. But is it really a good thing? Okay. First thing is that are all Pareto efficient allocation socially desirable? Think of society, person A and B, let's say. This is the simple society, we have only two people, A and B. Okay? So do A and B just, want, if A and B reach a point where on this, along this curve, okay, this curve just shows the Pareto efficient allocations. Okay, there are a bunch of them. Okay? We can ask question whether that these two people will just like any point on this curve. Okay? So person A and person B will be happy at point B, happy at point C, happy at point D. So any point will be fine. That's one question. So we can think of all these Pareto efficient outcomes. Is every Pareto efficient outcome socially desirable? That's what society wants. Okay? And then actually another question is a Pareto inefficient allocation like point A is socially undesirable. Okay? Meaning that if you are at point A, would the society wants to be get out of point A? Likely, unlikely? If the society just finds out that we are at point A, okay, will the society wants to be get out of point A? What do you think? Okay, let's raise hands. Okay. Let's think of yourselves as society. Let's think of yourselves as A or B. Okay? Think of yourselves as person A or person B. Okay? You just realize that we are at point A. Okay? You just saw the diagram. And we just realize that we are at point A. Okay? Would you want to get out of point A? Okay, I would want to get out of point A. Raise your hands. Just raise your hands. I mean, don't be shy. Raise your hands. Okay, I would not want to get out of A. So it seems like everyone, it seems like majority of you, majority of society members will want to get out of point A. Okay. So probably it seems that a Pareto efficient allocation is not socially desirable. Okay. Maybe. Actually, it's a pretty good question. Okay. We'll talk about a little bit more later about this one. But anyway. Actually, it is generally agreed upon that as you just think of, Pareto inefficient allocation is in general not desirable. Okay? So if you can choose a Pareto efficient allocation and Pareto inefficient allocation, it seems like, the society will want to have a Pareto efficient allocation. Is it true? Let's think about it. Okay. How about the next one? All Pareto efficient allocation socially desirable? Okay. So, for example, let's say you are either A or B. Okay. Let's say think of point B is obviously a Pareto efficient allocation. Would you want? Is it the best thing that society can have? This is the best thing. Raise your hands. This is not the best thing. Raise your hands. Why not? Why not? You can move to C, but obviously that person B doesn't want it. Why do you think the C is better than B? If you're an A, then you would like C. Probably. Yeah. If you're a B, you would like B a lot more than C, right? So Pareto efficient allocation outcome. So we can think of all these Pareto efficient outcomes, but it seems like depending on who you ask, some Pareto efficient allocation is preferred, right, than other outcomes. Okay. So if you ask A, then this person will just surely like D, for example. If you ask person B, they surely like person B, for example. Okay? So in that sense, Pareto efficient allocation may not be socially desirable all the time. Okay? So we have this, in a way that what the society wants and what the Pareto efficient outcome is, they may be different or they may be same. I mean, society may want a Pareto efficient allocation, but not just any of the Pareto efficient allocation. Okay? Or can a society want to have a Pareto inefficient allocation? Is it possible that society want to have a Pareto inefficient allocation? You may think not, right? Okay, let's think about it. Okay, so these are the questions regarding the efficiency and social desirability. Okay, so it seems like efficient. I should write. Efficient outcome is not necessarily a desired outcome, okay? But desired outcome, it seems, necessarily an efficient outcome, okay? So it seems like if we are in a condition where it's not efficient, making it efficient is generally a good thing. Okay, it seems like. Okay. That's actually a starting point for the government roles of the government. Okay, if you look at it, okay, because society wants a certain efficiency, so if we find ourselves in an inefficient state, we want to move away from inefficient state to an efficient state. Okay? That's the starting point. That's how you think of market failures. Okay? So we'll just talk about it briefly about market failures. Okay, so what we have seen so far is that market can reach an efficient outcome. Okay, the inefficient outcome may not be, all of them may not be desirable to the society, but desired inefficient outcome is certainly not desirable outcome. Okay. And the government may be may can play a role in correcting that inefficient outcome to an efficient outcome. Okay? That's what we are going to just look at right now. Now think of the government role now. What does government do? Okay? Actually, when we think of the market economy, we just don't think of government much because we actually take a government role granted in a market economy. Actually, the government does things in the market economy, even though we don't realize it, because it's just there all the time. Okay, so that's the basic functions of government, the invisible role of the government. That's the first thing that we think about. What is it? First, enforcing law and order. This is very important to a market economy. Think of the market exchange. Market exchange is a contract, right? If you have a market economy, then market economy requires the ownership. Okay, A and B shows up. Then A knows what he or she owns, and B knows what he or she owns. Then we can talk about the exchange, right? If it's not clear that who owns what, there cannot be an exchange. Okay? So the protection of property rights, for example, is an essential to a market economy. If there is no property rights, you cannot have a market. And obviously there must be a what? Enforcement of contracts, okay? And A and B just sign the contract. I will give you X to you, and then you, in exchange, you have to give Y to me. Okay, it should be enforced. It is signed with expectation of being enforced. If it is a case that the contract cannot be enforced, then nobody will write a contract. Right? So obviously, then you cannot have a market exchange, because market exchange is just a contract. Right? Think of it. So that's the basic role of the government. Okay? So even if we don't talk about it, we just implicitly assume the government actually does all these things. If they don't do it, we don't have an economy. And prevention of frauds, obviously, it's very important, okay? Because people can deceive another person. Okay, I will give you X. Then next day, the person will give you a fake one. Okay? Then how do we know? Then if it doesn't, not to make that happen, you have to have a certain law and order to enforce. In the case of frauds, the person will be penalized and all that, and also in fear of penalty, the person wouldn't do it. So that kind of system is actually vital functions of the government in the market economy. To have a market economy, you have to have this. And who enforces it? The government is expected to enforce this basic rule. And also, obviously, that other types of law and order, like corruption and criminal activities, if you have corruption everywhere, if you have criminals everywhere, okay, these countries cannot just function. Okay, you cannot have the healthy economy in this type of country. So if you have a war, right, you don't have an economy. People are killing each other on the streets. You cannot have a market exchange. Okay, you have to get out of there. Okay? So these are the basic functions of the government. So we don't call them interventions because it's just the basics. You have to have it all the time, right? And protecting the value of currency. Think of the modern exchange economy. You use money. You use paper money most of the cases. Okay? You go a store and they buy things. You don't give them your books, right? You give them a piece of paper, actually. Can be a coin, or it can be just a card, or anyway, it doesn't have any value in it. It's just a piece of paper. You just give a piece of paper and then you get a car. Okay? Something like that. So that's the currency that we use. Okay? And why do people actually accept the the paper money? Because they believe this paper money has a certain value. Okay, who ensures that that paper money have a value? That's the role of the government. It's actually not exactly the government. It's actually the central bank, government, including central bank, you believe that they will protect the value of this currency. That's how the market exchange economy works. If you don't think that currency will have that value, then exchange should be done using, let's say, things. You have to have a barter economy. Okay? Or just to stop doing anything. Okay? So in a country where there is lots of problems with this what have I done? With this protecting the value of currency, then we just see the economic crisis, human crisis. Okay, so the value of protecting the value of currency is such a basic function. Okay, we don't call it the government interventions. Okay. And last thing, you can think of it like building and maintaining basic infrastructures. Okay. To have a market economy, right, you have to have a law. You have to have a, let's say, road to go to a shop, right? You need a certain basic things that for the economy to work. So this is such a fundamental function that of the government. We don't call it the government interventions. Okay? So think about it. The government is everywhere, okay? Invisible way, and these are just the basic roles of the government. So when we talk about the government interventions, we are not talking about these things. Okay? These things are always there. It's very important. Okay? In some cases, government cannot do all these things, in some cases. If you, for example, like nowadays, if you read about the news about Venezuela, Venezuela, that the country that is in deep crisis now because of the oil price fall or all those things. If you read the news article about the Venezuelan economy, the government is just stopped functioning in a way that the government cannot protect the value of currency. They just print out the money that nobody values. Okay? So if you go to that country, you cannot buy anything. I mean, the store has nothing. Okay? People are actually dying there because there is no medicine in hospitals, something like that. So all those things are vital functions that we just take things that it's actually there. When we talk about the government interventions, we are just talking about the further government intervention, not this. Okay. Everyone agrees that these three things are the fundamental roles of the government. So in our course, what we are talking about is not this, but the further things, the more. Okay? Now, why do government have to do more? There are two grounds when we think about the government role, two grounds that the government are needed. One is actually one is the efficiency. We talked about this today, efficiency. What? If the market economy somehow gives us inefficient outcome, then society wants it to be efficient. Somehow we have to correct the inefficiency and then reach an efficient outcome. So who does that? The government may be able to do it. Okay? Because market just failed. So who have to do it? Government should do it. That's one argument of efficiency. So the government may intervene in an inefficient market. Okay? We just call it the market failure to achieve an economically desirable efficient allocation. I just use the economically desirable to make just things contrast to the second one. So economically desirable efficient allocation. So that's the thing that we just talked about. But there is another aspect of government intervention. We can call it in different names. We just call it social justice here, let's say. but it can be different names. It can be called in different names. Like equity, some people call it like whatever, something like that. Because what we see in general is that in many countries, the government may intervene, and they do intervene, to achieve a socially or politically desirable outcome. Okay? Meaning that it may not be, economically desirable. Meaning that it may not be efficient allocation. But even if it's not efficient, people may want it. Let's say everybody wants it, even though it's not efficient. Then what should the government do? If it's democratic government, the government should do it, right? If every one of you wants to do this, actually it doesn't matter whether it's economically efficient or not, but the government will do it. If they don't do it, what happens? In a democratic society, they will lose the next election, right? And then this government will be replaced by another government who will do it, right? So that is the another reason for interventions. So it's a socially or politically desirable allocation. So I just made up two names. So economically desirable outcome or socially desirable outcome. Sometimes they go together, but not always. Okay. It may lead to an economically inefficient allocation. Actually, you have seen many examples of this in economics course. For example, the minimum wage. Think of the minimum wage. You think of the basic economics. Minimum wage is a price control. Right? The government controls the price. Government sets the minimum price. Price control always gives you inefficient allocation. Right? Okay? That's basic economics. If you control the price, it cannot be good. If you think of the efficiency, right? But if everyone wants minimum wage, then we will have minimum wage. Not because it's efficient, but because it's desired by the society. Okay? So the government interventions can be explained generally using in two grounds: efficiency or social justice or equity or whatever. Okay. So the social policies, for example, like anti-poverty programs, that may be explained why it exists. It may be explained using just this argument, social justice. It's just that, that's what everybody wants. Okay? Even if it's not exactly efficient. So economists tend to look at the efficiency more than the social justice because the economists are pretty bad at doing this. It's pretty good at looking at the efficient allocations. Okay? So when we think of the government interventions and government programs in the later course of the lecture, we will generally look at how it affects the efficiency, whether it enhances it or whether it actually hinders the efficiency. Quite often, it hinders efficiency. Okay? But anyway, we will just look at it. And social justice, we will not look at it much. Okay? But you just have to have this idea that not every policy can be explained using the efficiency argument. Social justice argument may be as important as the efficiency argument. Okay? So when these two things are contradicting each other, then things getting really interesting. Okay? Then things become really controversial. For the minimum wage, it's always controversial because it seems like these two things just don't meet each other. Okay? Then things get interesting. If something is economically desirable and socially desirable, then it's not fun because everyone will like it. Okay? Why bother? Okay. So if they are contradicting each other, then we will have theories and arguments and all those things. So most of the things we will look at in this course are the things that these two things don't actually match. Okay, for the efficiency, I will just, I'm pretty sure that you should know this, market failures. So I'm not going to go over in detail, just to remind you that why the efficiency, why the government is needed on efficiency grounds, then we can think of market failure argument, like public goods, right? Goods without rivalry or excludability, you know what they mean, right? Rivalry just means that if the good has no rivalry, it can be used by many people without making anybody's utility going lower. And excludability is that you cannot prevent somebody from using it without paying it. Okay? So the public goods may not be provided in the market because they cannot, the private producer cannot make money out of this. So, for example, like national defense, lighthouses. So, if you have public goods, then generally the government should intervene to find some way to produce these public goods. Okay? Imperfect competition, like monopoly, oligopoly. Okay? In general, these outcomes are not socially efficient. Okay? Because the supply is smaller and price is higher than the socially efficient level. Okay? You know, in microeconomics, you learned about deadweight loss of a monopoly. If you have deadweight loss, that's an inefficiency. So that's the thing. So government often intervene to promote competition in the market. And actually, what's quite often talked about is the increasing returns to scale, like natural monopoly. Okay? So natural monopoly, if you leave the market alone in the natural monopoly setting, then you will have monopoly form or no form. For example, telecommunication industry. Okay? It requires a large investment. And once you make an investment, okay, the average cost is falling if you produce more and more. You just use the existing network. Okay? So average cost is falling. So marginal cost is lower, so it leads to monopoly. I mean, this is just a classic argument. Okay. So this monopoly or natural monopoly, oligopoly, all requires government intervention to make the economy more efficient. And for detailed argument for this, you should refer to microeconomics textbook. Okay. We are not that interested about monopoly in our course. Okay. But there is another one thing that is related with our course is discrimination. If there is a discrimination, okay, discrimination in a sense is a way to prevent competition. Okay. Let's say if employers discriminate against women, all employers discriminate against women. Women cannot enter the labor market. Even if they enter the labor market, they will be paid less than men. Okay? They cannot compete with men on an equal footing. Okay? That's, in a way, is thinking about discrimination as an imperfect competition. That's not good. So discrimination is an important way to hinder the efficiency. Okay? So anti-discrimination policies, for example, equal pay for men and women, for example, or equal pay across races or across nationalities. You can think of all of it as a way of increased efficiency in the market. Okay? So that's how we look at it. So some policies, anti-discrimination policies, has very strong efficiency argument. Okay, other causes of market failures, externality. Externality, you know all externalities, like a positive externality, negative externality. Positive externality is that social benefit, okay, is larger than the private benefit. Negative externality is the social cost is larger than private cost. Okay? Then privately efficient allocation is not socially efficient allocation. So externalities. For example, like basic research has a positive externality. Okay? If you do well in basic research, okay, the research outcome can be used in many different fields. So it is often regarded as something that has positive externality. Air pollution is obviously a negative externality, so the government will intervene a lot in these parts, like pollution, anti-pollution policies. It's all justified upon this externality argument. And subsidies for basic research, for example, generally justified using the externality argument. Social policies and social programs may have certain arguments based on externality, actually. Externality can be used, it seems like, anywhere. Okay? So we will talk about it a little bit later. So there are externality arguments. And another thing is the information problem. Okay? Because the perfect competition in the market assumes perfect information. So everybody has, good information about the price and qualities and all those things. Information asymmetry. Actually, we will talk about information asymmetry in much more detail later when you talk about the insurance. I will just give you just brief summary of it. So information asymmetry just means the market participants have unequal access to information. So one party has more information than the other. That's market information asymmetry. Okay? And because of this difference in information, okay, we may have economically inefficient outcome. Generally, we call them the adverse selection and moral hazard. Okay? For these, we will talk about it much more detail later. So I'll just give you, just an overview here. Okay? But if you should know that in general what adverse selection is and moral hazard is. So this one we will talk about it, for example, in the insurance market. And last thing is incomplete market. Incomplete market just means the market for some goods may not exist. Okay. Everybody wants it. It's actually a pretty good thing, but there is no market for it, so you cannot get it in the market. That's incomplete markets. Why is market can be incomplete? One possibility is that financial market is not developed, so there are certain goods that requires large investment. Let's say individual firms don't have that much money. Okay? So they should get the money from finance through financial markets. If the financial market is working really well, and if this investment is it's a high potential for success and then high rate of return, then there should be no problem in finding money through financial markets. But if there is no such financial markets, then you may not have that kind of money, so you cannot have that type of investment, so you cannot have that type of goods or services. Okay? For example, like building expressways. It costs a lot if you build an expressway. Okay? But if you can make money out of it, okay, then firms may find the money to do it. But let's say there is no financial market to do it, then you cannot have expressways. So, some countries have developed financial markets. They may not have any problem in finding money, and some countries don't. And another incomplete market is correlated risks. Okay, that's about the insurance market. So we will talk about it in the social insurance later. If I just give you, just a brief idea that how does the insurance market works? Insurance is just pooling money, right, to give a protection against a certain event. Okay? So for example, like every one of you pay $10, okay? And if one of you get sick, then this person gets, let's say, $1,000. That's how the insurance works, right? So if I get sick, then I will get $1,000. Where does the money come from? The money comes from everybody else's pocket. It's just pulling the money. The insurance company has no money. They should pull the money, and then if something happens, then use that money to give that person. Okay? But the insurance market will fail if everybody gets sick at the same time, right? If every one of you gets sick, then every one of you will want $1,000, right? Then obviously the insurance company cannot have that type of situation. If everybody gets sick at the same time, the insurance company has no money to do it, because the insurance works on the assumption that this event will happen independent of, will happen independently, meaning that your sickness should not affect anybody else's probability of being sick. But there are certain events that the risks are correlated, meaning if that happens, it happens in a large scale. Okay? For example, like a crop failure. So let's think of yourselves as farmers. Okay? So the farmers in a certain area. What affects your output? It will be affected by, for example, like your skills, right? What type of seeds you use, what type of fertilizers you use, but also there is a big factor, which is weather. Okay? If it's too wet, too dry, too hot, too cold, your crop will fail no matter what. Right? But this weather is a thing that affects everyone in a certain area. Right? So if you're a crop insurance company, the event that you have to pay for will happen in general, at the same time to many customers. So that is not good for insurance company. So crop failure is very difficult to get insured. Unemployment is the same thing, because when the economy goes bad, okay, a large number of people will become unemployed. Okay? So those kind of things you may not have. So the insurance companies are very reluctant to write policies for crop failures or unemployment. So we just call them correlated risks, and these type of correlated risks may not be insured in the market. Everybody wants this insurance, but you cannot have it in the market, for example. Then we call it incomplete market. So government can play the role here. Actually, unemployment insurance is very important function in modern government. So, efficiency grounds, we usually look for ways that market fails. And then the market fails generally in public goods. Public goods we are not that concerned with, okay, in general, in our course. Imperfect competition, somewhat, but not that important. But the externality or information asymmetry or incomplete market are all relevant to our cases. Okay? So you can think of social policies from an efficiency point of view. But as I said, we have social justice ground, but we are not going to talk about it much. Okay, I think we should stop here today and continue tomorrow.